Hello, everybody. Mark Sham here, founder and CEO of Suits and Sneakers, and also recently hashtag SA Citizens Unite. And I'm really excited because today I get to interview a guest that I don't have to introduce at all unless you've been living under a rock for the last 10 years. So with that, I'd like to officially welcome Mmusi Maimane. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey, Mark, it's great to be with you, and I would love in future to be there in person, but this is the world we live in now, so good to be chatting.
Well, absolutely. And I think this will be the first of a few chats because it's always interesting to see what's happening in someone's life, especially someone like yours when you have the aspirations that you do. So I'd love to get straight into it, Mmusi. What the hell are you doing with yourself at the moment for the few people who don't know?
Hey, Mark, I'm building a grassroots movement really to bring South Africans together. We are organized around one mission, which is that our big why is that South Africa will be a great place when all men and women, regardless of race, color, gender, will work together, prosper together, and live together peacefully. That's our why. That's what I wake up to every day. And we do that by building a grassroots movement. So I'm going around the country activating communities that have not been spoken to, ignored. And we want to work together with all South Africans to say, I ask you to do three things: be an activist, be an advocate, and to hold anyone accountable who abuses power. And we do that in four areas. In education, so we've been advocating for equal education for all South Africans. We talk about the economy. How do we build an inclusive South Africa? We talk about the environment. How do we ensure that it's sustainable for future generations? Because I've got to hand over something. And then lastly, we've been focusing on electoral reform, which is how do we directly elect people? So my job has been really exciting in that I get to meet ordinary people to work together to build a South Africa, one South Africa. And that's why it's called One South Africa, because I think the problem in this country is that we've got too many South Africans. South Africa for the wealthy, a South Africa for the poor, a South Africa that is black, a South Africa that is white, a South Africa that is rich, and a South Africa that is poor, all of those things. I want to build one South Africa upon which all of us can prosper and live together.
Yeah, I mean, those things obviously really resonate with me. And, just to give everybody a bit of context, this interaction, even between you and I, has come about because of a frustration that I've had just as an ordinary citizen for the longest time, where I feel we are so jointly disconnected. And, my views are very public about how I feel about the ANC and more specifically their actions and their track record. But I also think that we as a nation are supremely apathetic at times. We will moan about what South Africa is like at the moment, but we won't necessarily get up and do something about it. So your movement has been fascinating to me because you have announced to the public that this is what you're doing, but you've been very big on this actions, not words. I don't want to call it a slogan, but the theme that's really resonated with me. How are you being received wherever you go?
I think all of us are tired, right, of words, right? And all of us know instinctively that often politics treat us their subjects, as if anything they do or anything the state does is a favor to citizens. And having been in political systems, I kind of became very frustrated about that. And we set out our posture to say, how can we serve people? So when I talk about those three things, being an activist, I always ask anybody who wants to be part of One SA to be an activist. So during this COVID period, we made a strong stance to say, can we go out to communities? And I'm grateful to say now, recently I've just discovered that our team has delivered just well over 2 million meals to households. We've gone out and delivered now well over 15,000 food parcels to communities. We've now set up food gardens all across communities because we think that there's sustainability in food gardening, etc. It's our activism. When we talk about activism in education, we went up and set up an online learning center because I didn't just want to fight for equal education. We talk about blended learning, and I've got to provide a facility upon which learners can be a part of. And so it's been this sense that you can't just talk about something, you got to go do it. And then you learn along the way. I don't think we're near cracking perfection or doing what we think is going to be perfect in the long run. but we learn all the way along the way because we get involved with doing. And I think innate in any human being is a sense of purpose that is expressed in doing something. And I think the opportunity in our country now is we could look at politicians and hope that maybe they'll deliver us from this mess or whatever. And South Africans are so obsessed about finding the next hero or the next this. Actually, it's within ourselves. To quote President Obama, we're the ones we've been waiting for. And ultimately, if we all get out and actually be active in our towns, hold our public representatives to account, they'll stop treating us like rubbish with respect or whatever. And ultimately, if all of us simply say to ourselves, who are we advocating for? Are we advocating for the citizen who's left out, for anyone who's not participating in the South Africa as we want? We can truly change our nation. And I think, so for me, let's talk, let's get to doing things. And fair enough, along the way, we'll be able to bring change to our nation.
And again, this really resonates with me because when I started the hashtag SA Citizens Unite movement, I was trying to do three things. I was trying to bring awareness to just why I think we are in an abusive relationship with the ANC, but I think that that's quite well documented. But sometimes people have to be reminded so that they also stand up, because that's how groundswells happen. That was one. Two is, I said, I think that there's a lot of stuff that we as citizens can do automatically to make a big difference. And so what you're talking about right now, that hits in the absolute middle spot. And then three, I think that there's an education that needs to happen for citizens, because there's a certain mentality that we've adopted over many, many, many years. And it's just good to have a source that reminds you what's normal, what's not normal. The power lies with us, kind of like you quoted Obama. So I want to ask you two questions back to back. The first is, if someone wants to help you, wants to get involved, let's say they don't even want to, because people are quite finicky about getting involved with parties, but what happens if they just want to get involved with the action? Could that happen?
Yeah, and absolutely. On our website, you can get details as to what's going on in your community. We've got structures in all 9 provinces, so you can effectively, in any province, make contact with someone and they'll direct you as to what you can do and where. But, more than any of that, the thing that has blown me away about One South Africa is that recently I got a call from someone who said to me, Mmusi, there are people who are here, they say they are from One South Africa. I said, what are these people doing? They happen to be in an informal settlement for white South Africans just outside Pretoria. And they were there delivering food parcels because they said, as One South Africa, we believe we can build one nation. And I'd never met the people, and I'd never myself been to the informal settlement. But I was blown away. I was blown away by the fact that innate within human beings, they could do something in their communities. So more than only just seeking to be a part of a collective movement across, do something where you are. For so many people, they come to work, and we in South Africa, we don't only have an abusive relationship with ANC, as you say, but I genuinely don't think we've ever sat down and heard each other's stories. I need to be able to sit down with you, Mark, and say, hey man, what's your background? What's your story? Because if we're going to build Citizens United, we want to build One South Africa, reconciliation sometimes requires me just sitting, hearing your story. And so that you're not a statistic, you're not a race to me. You're a father, you're a husband, you're a partner, you're whatever. But I can know your story. And when I know your story, I can serve you better. And I think in our corporates, we still see 2 South Africas where sometimes people are treated like outsiders. When last did you speak to the guy who's bringing you coffee or the guy who's helping in the office? So to me, it's not only just a question of activism, but the spirit behind saying, we are a nation and we've got to build that One South Africa. It's a value I've lived by, and people can do what they can, but they can make contact with us, and we'll partner with them in doing whatever we can do.
Because that's really the spirit of, if I just think about myself as a citizen and the role that I believe that I can play, I have certain resources and I have certain reach like you. So I feel like that's important. That's why you and I are having this interview. I want to bring a very real conversation to people. I want to help educate people, but then I also want to lead to action. And that's kind of why we're having a chat. I just want to go way back quickly. You know, what I've learned in the last just few weeks, and my experience has literally been that of dipping my pinky toe in the world of politics. It is a brutal, ugly, and sometimes, or for me at least, the way I perceive it to be, oftentimes a toxic space. What made you get involved? You know, I don't want to talk about the DA per se, but what I want to understand is what made you get involved in politics in the first place? Because I think the why matters. So why the hell did you do this?
Yeah. If you don't mind, Mark, I'm going to tell you a story. I was in Zanzibar, a community just perhaps just near Joburg, and I remember going there. We were running an NGO that used to deliver food to this community. I knocked at this woman's door, and I found this grandmother in her garden digging a hole in her garden. I said to her, "Mama, what are you doing?" She said to me, "Mdanam, I'm building a toilet." I said, "How can it be? How can it be that at that time, it was just about 2009, 2008, we had this grand infrastructure project heading towards the World Cup, but we couldn't, at a basic level, build a toilet for this woman." Now, I was there as an NGO person, so I could only give her food. There's no ways any NGO in this country can build a toilet. That requires a different ecosystem. It's infrastructure. And I thought her municipality had failed, and by nature, she wasn't experiencing freedom, because without a toilet, what dignity is there? And having grown up in Soweto, where you might not be involved in politics, but politics is interested in you. And that's why I often say to people, when people say to me, "But we don't want to get involved in politics," I said, "But the politics will involve you, believe me." Whether you're a business, whether you're a church, whether you're a whatever, politics will involve you. And so at that point, I thought, I can't surrender that. Having been in the ANC, I said, I'm going to go do something. And I thought to myself, that sense of activism, let's go fight to build this woman a toilet. Now, the tragedy behind our politics, just in general, is that you can have 50 political parties, you can add more, just keep adding to the list. The truth is, political parties are narrow in their interests, they are self-serving, and fundamentally what often happens is that it's an elite project that partners to control the state, benefit itself, benefit its candidates, and fail at the basic task of serving citizens. So when I got involved, I had this ambition to say, let's go do something. And you realize quite quickly that after a number of years, you stop hearing citizens, if I'm willing to be honest. You just become political and a politician. And I had to almost, as I say famously now, my new title is the recovering politician. It's to say to myself, how do we get back to active citizenship? How do we get back to serving people? And whatever happens, then we can always depart from a position of service. So still today, you say to me, what am I doing this for? I guess it's still one day to get that woman a toilet. That's my organizing why. Because if we can get that right, my home at the time that I was going to this woman was only 5 kilometers away from there. We had 4 toilets in our house. And I thought, how can we live in that country? How do we have a South Africa that has got 4 toilets and one who's trying to build a toilet? So my organizing mission, starting with that point where all men can work and live together and prosper together, still resides in the fact that if my life has been a fulfillment of my journey, or if whatever the journey of this country is that never shall it be that actually where you live or who you are determines how many toilets you should have. We should all have a basic level of rights that ensures that we build one South Africa. So articulated in the vision is that. And I want one economy that works for everybody, one nation that says, regardless of the color of your skin, you are a citizen and you can contribute. I really want an education system that works for everybody so that it doesn't matter whether you've got money or no money, your education is in place. And it can't be that in one community, crime happens at such high levels and in another people are gated that they don't know, that rather we should have a police service that's on the ground for people to work. So whilst we advocate for those things, we also must go do things. So that's what organizes me. That's why I'm so fulfilled with my life now and working towards building this nation.
And again, it's funny, you and I have only briefly met, but when I hear you say these things, they really, really resonate with me. And it's a similar thing that I've been saying for the last while, that I just know that my friends and the people around me aren't very interested in politics, but I keep trying to get them to understand that whether they are interested or not, the political landscape impacts them. Unemployment impacts the average person because unemployment goes up, crime continues to go up, corruption goes up. All of these things lead to less money, more crime, and that has quite a literal impact on us. I mean, I'm just listing two. And then to your point, we live in a South Africa that is so divided, and we can live in bubbles. And this is where I can have an honest chat with you. I am 36 years old right now. I was 8 years old when apartheid ended. I don't come from money, but I was never poor. I never worried about if, I had a meal, or I was never worried about a roof over my head. And I would get a new pair of school shoes once a year. That's kind of how I think about it. And I lived in this normal little suburb in the south of Johannesburg, and I had absolutely no clue what South Africa was really like. I think a lot of white South Africans, and I'm not trying to make it racial, it's just interesting, I'm talking on behalf of me, you can live in a bubble. And when I hear you talk about the story about the lady who doesn't even have a toilet, like digging, it's funny because I have absolutely no comprehension of what that's like. And I think that this is part of the problem, is that we still live in these silos very much away from each other. So, we're 26 years apart. We kind of just went, hey, we're really sorry. Are we cool? We cool? Handshake briefly, cool. We'll put a few things in place, and then everybody goes on their business. It's just been no way to actually solve things. So I really do, I'm just saying that to you because it really, I'm passionate about it and it resonates with me. I want to get a little bit deeper, specifically to you, because, and this is very subjective, what I'm about to say is you definitely have your critics. And I think that there are some things, like I've also seen how people can be critical of anything in this country. So I want to give you fair gap. I feel like I feel like you've sometimes got a bit of a bad rap. I feel like when and this doesn't represent your entire career, but in patches, if you do something, black people call you a sellout or a coconut, or you're not black enough for them. White people look at you in this, I don't know what it is. There's almost like you have these critics at times, and I've watched it from afar, and I've always been curious. So how do you respond to your critics? What do you have to say? And I don't mean in an attacking way, like how do you diffuse the situation? What do you say to people about your intentions, your heart, and your mission?
One I think is, if non-racialism and a reconciled South Africa was an easy project, then people like Nelson Mandela, etc., it would have been a breeze, right? But people actually ended up in jail for this. The history of non-racialism in this country predates the ANC. It's like the early 1900s. Citizens had always been fighting to be recognized. Even the term African didn't exist until people said, oh, actually, it's possible for you to be a human being in that sense. And when you live in a country like South Africa with a history of racial divisions, trying to bring those two is trying to marry histories of oppressed and oppressor. And I say that because sometimes the hopes of one are the fears of another. So when you say that I hope the economy is transformed, just that term alone, to someone else, it immediately says to them, wait, hang on, that means there's less for me. So it is a hope for one, but a fear for another, and vice versa. So within that, you are always going to have extreme critique on either end for exactly those reasons. And even around certain social interactions, I remember having to take on some disciplinary issues. And when you are disciplining a black person, the same people are like, no, now you are sellout to whites. When you are dealing with a white person, they say, oh, you're just trying to appease the blacks. Because everyone has a natural bias to a race towards victimhood, often. And often it's because either the color of our skin. So it saddens me often when I hear from white South Africans who turn around and they say, we feel like we don't belong here. And so we're being attacked for just being white. And then labels like, we talk about privilege and many other those things. It sometimes diffuses the conversation. And sometimes even amongst black South Africans, there's a genuine feeling that how can you feel like a minority in a country where you are the majority? But economically, for many black South Africans are excluded. And so there's a feeling like that. So I never focused on, I must understand the project as to what we're trying to do, because actually trying to build South Africans together, black and white, isn't just a kumbaya moment. It has economic consequences. It has social interactions. And doing something of that nature is to attack certain systems that benefit certain people. Because in all fairness, for other people, division is actually very beneficial. For some people, they're like, no, brother. I'm happy for my suburb to remain lily white. Because then that way, my neighbors talk like me, they live like me, and then we're cool. Or for other people, it suits us that these divisions exist because we can continue to blame someone else when we are not doing the very work we ought to do. So those critics, we must be willing to stare them down, because the project of a reconciled South Africa is going to come at a cost. It has always come at a cost. Others were locked up for it. So for me, to have people on social media or Twitter, Facebook say things about me, I really have no problem with that. So long as I think where I would take personal responsibility is that I didn't always fight back to explain to people to say, actually, this is what we're trying to do. And it is painful. And it is painful. You can even see it now, even in divisions about which lives must matter. That is a political message that has critiques on both sides. But never lose track of the fact that saying Black Lives Matter as an argument isn't a statement that seeks to equate them higher than any other life. It just simply says this life matters. And we must honor that. And that doesn't mean you have to be black to say that. It just means all of us must own that value. So, and I could go on community by community. If there was an issue of gender-based violence, I would say women's lives matter. And I don't need to be a woman to say that. I need to be a citizen who cares about them. So collectively, I just do think that I've got a lot more work to do in being able to talk more about reconciliation, because that value is lost. That value is being lost, and that's why it becomes hard. And so sometimes it depends on which South Africa you talk to. If it's a South Africa that is wealthy, people are like, yeah, we hear you. If it's South Africa that's poor, people are like, but look, we want to fight against those people. And political parties also benefit from these divisions that we have, because they can keep saying, we're a party for blacks, or we're a party for whites, or we're a party for Afrikaners, or we're a party for this. And that's not my interest. And when you're trying to swim against that grain, you are bound to have enemies. But there's a famous Zulu saying, which I like. It says, "Zikonkota ehamba," which means they bark at the car that is moving. And frankly, I'm okay with critique of that nature. Is it sometimes difficult to listen to? Of course it is. But know that you are fighting for a future for your kids. You know, at a personal level, my wife is a white South African. My kids are mixed race. So when we're in Soweto and Dobsonville to visit my parents, I'll invariably meet someone who says, hey, you've done well. You've married a white person. And I'm going, you are mad to suggest that, not because I think that white people are better or not, but you mustn't. It's not that she's a white person that makes her better. You know, and then sometimes when I go to another suburb in a community, people will say, ooh, why are you marrying lower down, marrying a black South African, or why are you doing this? And so all of those, sometimes we've got to be patient as a family to walk together, even at a personal critique, to be able to go, no. We are not going to listen to the critics, but we will work with a silent majority of citizens who actually want a non-racial future. And that project is hard, but it's what I will give my life to. So when I listen to critique, sometimes I go, just remember what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and I really take my hat off to you, because I think to consistently have a thick skin where you don't let it get to you, maybe you're just much better experienced than I am. I think it's quite something. You know, in the video that went viral, I made this. I was trying to explain something where I said, I recognize that I have gotten to enjoy an air of white privilege. I wasn't asking other people to agree. I was just saying, for me, I feel that I've been taken maybe a little bit more seriously in a boardroom because I'm white. I can speak crystal clear English. I just look the part. I think I've experienced that. I also had the experience of, even though we didn't grow up with money, my dad was an entrepreneur. So I grew up just watching a man start his own business and get it right, versus I didn't grow up where my mom was a domestic and my dad was a gardener, and that's where I thought the ceiling was. I think that that's an air of privilege. You know, like I was trying to explain these things, and I was trying to say that I'm not frustrated just with South Africa because I feel I don't have a future here. I believe in the value creation system, that if you create value for other people, you'll always be needed, wanted, and reciprocated. So I was trying to explain this, and my God, I got like attacked wholesale from white people just because I said, I believe I have experienced an air of white privilege. So, you know, I think I'm just trying to give you that context. I think it's fascinating that you can kind of like, I just couldn't believe it. And it shows you that when you take a stand for anything, or when you say anything at any point in time, there's going to be someone on one side that says, well, you've said that, now you're against this, or however it's perceived. So well done to you for taking that through. And I don't think by no means, I think you've had a much more positive career than you had a negative one. It's just interesting to see how people critique. And the craziest part to me is how people will critique other people that they know nothing about. Like up until recently, I'd never met you. I don't actually, all I see is a guy maybe on TV or, you know, on social media. But now I think that I know everything about Mmusi because he's, you know, I own him. I've seen him on TV twice. I know everything.
And, you know, sometimes you will get, you're not born with a thick skin. You know, one of the mantras I kind of live by, or a statement that's always made sense to me, I quote Obama a few times, not because he's the only favorite president, I mean, but there are many others. But he delivers his final speech in Chicago, and then he makes this statement. He says, the thing that we must guard against the most is cynicism. And that, for me, has become the one thing I've always said to myself I must guard against. Because when we are cynical, which often social media and all of that are pools where cynicism is the thing that drives, where we stop believing ideals and we become cynical, then it's just a game, really. But I must keep myself fresh in my soul, because when you develop a thick skin, eventually you stop hearing critique and you stop hearing other voices. And then the temptation to become cynical is always there. And then once you're cynical, literally you can say, oh, well, non-racialism, it'll never work. So why should I keep fighting for it? That people, I shouldn't be able to look at you now and say, oh, well, Mark is white. It's likely he's racist and he's privileged, full stop. That's cynicism, because now I don't want to hear your story. I'm not interested in that. I have already imbued certain labels upon you. And that's the consequence. So you might look at me and say, it's black. What does he know? You know, black people are corrupt and this, and that's that. So I think we must guard in our own souls. The greatest challenge is that of cynicism. So for me, and actually, funny enough, my first ever parliamentary debate, an opposition member from another party wrote me a note and said, just remember, some of the critique is just gamesmanship. And so sometimes I follow people on social media and I go, yep, you're paid to say that. It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah, that's a great way of saying it. Okay, so Mmusi, I want to, kind of in closing off, I think there's a few things I just want to cover before we go. The one is, it's a short question for me, but one of the critiques I get a lot on the pages that I run is people will say, oh, well, now there's all these different political parties and it's just shallowing the vote across the board. And I see the merit in it, but I also sometimes disagree. But I guess the question that keeps popping up, and a few people asked me to ask this to you, is what is your take or your state of play on partnering with other parties come 2024, etc.? How do you see that working? Would you partner or form a coalition with other parties further down the line?
To be honest with you, we've invested a lot in this direct election business. And to me, we've got 48 political parties in this country. We're going to have 50 come the next elections. It would be like trying to convince people who don't watch rugby that by adding more rugby teams, then we will watch rugby. It doesn't work like that. So I'm not convinced that adding more political parties is a solution. What I am convinced of is that all of us as citizens, if there's one thing we can unite on, is a constituency-based model that directly elects people. Because then that way, we can all kind of go, well, Mark, you represent the south of Joburg. If you don't do your job, we can remove you or we can send you to parliament. That's it. That is powering. That says to citizens, we must do that. So that's the first thing. So I'm heavily invested in that. And in the next 2 years, we'll know what the law does, because if we can do that, what I'm really going out for is a top 400 contest, right? Do we have the best 400 people running parliament? That's the question. There are 400 members of parliament. Are they the best 400 people we can find to run our country? That is the question. And if that is not the case, well, let's go out and recruit the best 400, get them to stand so that we can elect them. So that's how it would work. If the law, though, didn't make that best 400 possible, then and only then would I then say we need less parties on the ballot box. So I would always mobilize. And even when I was in my previous role as leader of the opposition and leading the DA, I sought to bring as many different parties together as possible, because I maintain that if you think the common enemy is a change of government, well, you're not going to do it by just simply adding more and more parties. The people who won the election last year are the people who didn't vote. That's the party that grew last year. And so within that context, if there's a lessening of an appetite around democracy, we must all be concerned. 17 million citizens did not vote last year. 13 million were registered and didn't even turn out. So it is the minority that elected this government. So all I'm calling for is that let's get to the 17 million. And more than anything, my danger with political parties is that people become elected, they get souped up into parliament, and then you never hear from them, right? Like if I asked you today, when last you speak to your MP, do you even know who your MP is? I would confidently say you don't, in all likelihood. So let's fix that. Let's get back to hearing from the people. It's one thing South Africa has, in its history, was known for. Black and white people knew that power was always in their hands. Post 1994, we said power is in the politicians' hands, and now we all get surprised when the state catch. Let's get back to the people, get back to grassroots, and it is the hard and the long way, but it's certainly, for me, the only way we'll reform this country. So that's what I'm working towards. So in 2024, I want to present to South Africa the best 400 people who they have chosen, who come from their communities, who they can elect, and that ultimately parliament. Because when those people have to vote whether the president is fit for office or not, they will think, what will Mark say in the south of Joburg if I defend this president in a motion of no confidence, or I support this budget item even though I haven't thought about it? Our democracy is weakened by majoritarianism and winner takes all, and it does not account to the people.
Well said. And I got so caught up in everything else you were saying there that I actually almost forgot this has been passed into law and they've got 2 years to enact. Okay, so in closing, I want to give you the floor. There are going to be a lot of people watching this, and I'm going to put this whole interview up together, but then also what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut these in patches. So I guess to you, I want to give you the floor. I want to say, pretend with me for a second that the entire nation is at your feet and they are listening to what you have to say right now. What would be the message? What would be the call to action that you would like them to take both now and later?
Look, my call to people of this country is that history has proven that South Africa can triumph. Our people are resilient. Our country is resilient. We're going through a period right now where things are changing. And change is never easy. For many other people, they're disappointed with this government because it feels like it's a failure on them. So know that the next year is going to be ugly. But we have to get through it. We have to get through it as a people, because what lies on the other side is renewed, a new country. And we've got to charter it together as people. And the way we do that is, I would urgently ask you to consider just in the following few areas. One, if you're a businessman, let's stop defending the government. Let's work together now to build an economy upon which all citizens can participate in and thrive in it. That actually, let's pursue a sense upon which those who are committing crimes can end up in prison. That we build an education system that actually everybody can benefit. That we look after the environment, because we have to hand over a planet to future generations. And let's reform the Electoral Act so that we can vote for the best 400. Your job in that is to be an activist where you are at. And naturally, I would say, be part of One South Africa. But any initiative that seeks to engage citizens in owning their communities, their cities, their country, is an initiative I want to work with. Because when it's said and done, the way out of this malaise, the way out of this current situation, we can choose one of two paths. We can all sit back and say, nothing's going to change. We'll all immigrate. And if we haven't physically immigrated, we'll immigrate our minds, our resources, all of that. Or we can say, now is the time that we unite as South Africans, demonstrate to politicians that we own the power, mobilize as a society, and we can bring change. So to the question about whether people think we should have synchronized elections or not, I think we should have synchronized elections. And I think they should all be in 2022 rather than in 2024, because you can shorten parliament and you don't have to extend local government by that long. And if we don't complain, organize. Organize your street, organize your community, get volunteers together. Let us take our country and say, this is our nation. And when we do that, we can bring change. So that's what all I'm trying to do. And that's what I'd invite people to do. And I'm saying to them, across all sectors, we can bring a reformation to this country. We've only got the next 24 months, the next year and a half, and we have a nation to build. So to me, it's not a half empty glass, it's a half full glass. And we're seeing finally people begin to question whether this is the right government we should have. And that's a good thing, because that's how democracy works. And if we pull together all of those of us who agree in the middle, we can build a great country. So come on, sign up, register, do whatever, join South African Citizens Unite, join whatever. But we can come together ultimately to bring change to our nation. And it is possible, because you've got the power.
Mmusi, I really appreciate your time. I appreciate the spirit in which you've conducted yourself today. I'm a person that loves to just have real, open, hearty conversations with people. So I've really enjoyed spending this time with you, and it's been fascinating kind of understanding your mind. And I do believe that you are saying things in a genuine and heartfelt spirit. I really do believe that, and I hope that other people got the same spirit. I believe that you want the best for the country. I really do. So thank you so much for your time. I believe that this will be the first of many chats. One of the benefits to doing something like digitally is that we don't have to make a big song and dance of it. We can use 30 or 40 minutes to do this. So thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And I cannot wait to get this out to more people and get your message out.
Mark, I really appreciate it. And thanks for the invite. And honestly, even with your endeavors, what you are doing, I wish you all the best. And as I say to you, that the more people put up their hands, the more actually South Africans, because it is within us. We've shown it time and time and again. It's within us. So the problem is not us. So I think, so thank you. It's been a great privilege and an honor. I hope I haven't bored you to death. I hope I've at least just tried to share my heart.
It's been, and that's where I was going for. I think oftentimes when you are in the spotlight the way you are, we don't get to have these like hearty conversations and see behind the scenes. And that's why I think we'll have many chats over time, just because there's many different things that will come along. But for now, I think this was absolutely awesome. Thanks again.